My family can remember their past lives. So one day I told my son I was a girl who was murdered. He grinned and said, "What are the odds that we would meet again?" When I was young, a fortune teller told me that I was going to be shot on my 25th birthday by a loved one. The photo that my wife took of me that day showed the relief in my face when I realized what the fortune teller meant, but it also showed my brother in the background holding a Glock. I've never seen A Clockwork Orange, and my boyfriend is obsessed with Stanley Kubrick, so we watched it last night. The movie was alright, but the rape scene was disturbing, more due to the fact that I glanced over at my boyfriend, who grinned and whispered to me, "This is my favorite part." My doctor smiled when he asked how my sex life was, and I answered, "Extremely active and pleasurable." His smile faded when the Q-tip he stuck into my urethra came out covered in maggots and soil. I thought werewolves were supposed to be humans that turned into wolves at night. Well, it's night, so why the hell is there a naked guy with a collar curled up on my dog's bed? I woke up in the middle of the night to the sight of the Grim Reaper raising his scythe. "Don't worry," he told me calmly. "I'm only here for the dog." Being forced to marry someone she didn't love, Alice decided to do anything to prevent the I-do's. So that's why she smiled when her fiancé lifted her veil and revealed her mouth had been stitched shut. A piece of her scarf got caught in the door as she was leaving. She probably wouldn't have suffocated to death if she wasn't the last one out of the elevator. "Susie, let's dress a snowman up like Daddy. It'll be fun," her mom smiled, adding the final touch of a knife in the snowman's heart. In the kitchen, Susie's dad dropped dead completely out of the blue, blood pooling from his chest. My girlfriend wanted to roleplay as Snow White, and I as her prince. To make it even more realistic, I even poisoned an apple, but she wasn't in the mood so much after eating it. I asked the old scientist if the body swap was permanent. No, you don't worry. It should only last a few months. Then he used my face to give me the most unsettling smile. Now let's see if you last that long. My small daughter was having so much fun walking in footsteps from the overnight snow. We only stopped when we realized that not only should there not be footsteps from last night's snowfall, but they definitely should not be leading to the back door. When I fell down the old well behind our house, I knew Daddy would hear me yelling after a while, but that was before the rain muffled my screams. I sat at the head of the table and asked my dear old mother to lead us in our Thanksgiving grace. I normally do it, but I feared that it would be her last Thanksgiving with us. All she did was cry and mumble through the stitches I sewn through her mouth, so my fears were correct. I dragged her away by her hair and could hear the mumbles and sobs from the rest of the family. It wasn't really my choice to go vegan. I blame my ability to see ghosts. If you could see the amount of bloodied, mangled animal spirits that cruise around to follow every human who ate them, it would probably turn you off the meat too. I kept hearing a strange giggle from the TV, regardless of what channel or volume it was on. I never thought to check behind the TV. It was just a prank, they reminded themselves after they shoved Daryl into a locker. They forgot it was the last day of school, and the smell was now filling the hallways in the summer heat. Haunted corn mazes in early fall were always a favorite seasonal afternoon to me. That was until I limped, bloody and broken, further into the labyrinth and heard a chainsaw roar in the distance. "Grandma's spirit will always be with you," my mom assured me. It's been 12 years, and she still sits in the corner, staring at me every night. It was finally warm enough to swim in the river, and we couldn't wait to get out there. Thanks to my parents' no electronics at the cabin rule, we didn't learn about the toxic leak until our bodies were already beginning to deform. Henry thought that being told to feed the pigs was a punishment for what he did. When his father didn't give him slop and locked the gate behind him, Henry knew it was much worse. My mom passed away, and I couldn't be happier that that abusive monster was out of my life. Going through her things, I found an album of missing person flyers with my baby pictures for a family 1,000 miles away. I rejoiced as we completed the sacrifice and wiped away the blood and feathers. I only realized as my wife began screaming that the book never promised she would bear a human baby. I tried to reason with them, explaining that human sacrifice would not bring rain to the desert. As I jerked away from the blade, gently slicing my face, a blood dripped and fell to the sand, and a thundercloud roared in the distance. On the last day of school, as the bell rang, the students ran out of the building, not listening to the teacher's shouts and hollers. It's a shame that the school board voted to add new bleachers for the football stadium, instead of a different sounding alarm for a missile warning. The blossoming slasher had returned for another year, dominating the morning news with bodies found splayed wide open and covered in pollen. Turning off the report, I called my children down for dinner and saw my eldest, the shy indoor type, had thick cakes of pollen under his nails. The tips of my toes were turning black, and my teeth were chattering so hard I thought they may crack as I walked through the fresh, heavy snow. As badly as my body wanted to shut down, I knew that the woman with the shears wasn't too far behind. Little Jonathan could barely contain his excitement as he got to go on his first ice fishing trip. After a few hours of just sitting there, he grew bored and asked if he could swim with the other kids that he saw under the ice. The women rejoiced when they heard their captor drop dead in the other room. Quickly, the realization that they were still tightly chained in the basement sank in. The crabbing boat settled in a massive swell that almost took them under. Quickly, they took inventory of what they lost, but can't seem to identify an extra crewman. As we were going over the paperwork of my mother's estate, we came across a property none of us had heard about. Driving out to take a look, we searched the little farmhouse and found a dozen children-sized graves in the basement, a few empty ones with our names on them. Every night I think back about how embarrassing it was trying to flirt and how I wish I got in her name at the bar. At least then, I could properly mark her grave. The thunder crashing, waking me up in the middle of the night, but the steady drip kept me from falling back asleep. Getting up to grab a bucket, another flash of lightning showed me that there was no leak, but a figure latched to my ceiling corner, soaking wet. Diligently, we sterilized every inch of our home with the strongest disinfectant we could get our hands on. We never planned for the 0.1% that could survive, now proliferating around us. Johnny hadn't seen his imaginary friend since he was 7 years old. That made the friend request 20 years later all the stranger. With smiles plastered across their faces, the bride and groom rushed off to their honeymoon suite. "Death won't do us part," he smirked as he peeled off his skin to unveil the creature beneath. Turning off her phone, Claire settled in by the river for her monthly Wiccan ritual. "And here's the little hippie witch," a boy from her class yelled, and a half dozen or so of his friends came from the trees carrying ropes and baseball bats. I finally stood up against my abusive husband. Now his ghost reminds me every day that not even death will do us part. "Be careful where you look," my mom warned me as we quietly crept through the darkened house. "It's only when you see them that they can see you." "It's just an appendectomy," my mom assured me. "Very routine, and you'll be out of surgery before you know it." With the anesthesia setting in, I could vaguely make out my doctors arguing over how much my other organs would be worth. The flash flood tore apart the land so that hundreds of coffins became exposed. When trying to relocate them, we found they were all empty and littered with scratch marks. All of the children ran outside to play in the season's first snow. Rolling on the ground and sticking out their tongues to catch little flakes, they quickly tasted the ash. Ever since she was a kid, Evelyn was obsessed with seeing an angel. Sitting in her chair many decades later, she came face to face with a multi-eyed abomination of shapes and realized her picture of heaven may not be accurate after all. My friend texted, "Detention is killing him." We hatched an over-the-top plan to spring him, like in the 80s teen movie. As we got to the library and found him bloodied on the ground, the door slammed shut behind us, and a voice from the PA system told us we shouldn't have came in today. Every toilet and shower in the town is clogged at the same time, spewing water and waste all over. Once in the sewers, they found a fleshy mass that caused the blockage quivering. I had forgotten my book on demonology at my grandma's house when I stayed there for the weekend. She has terrible eyesight and tried to make brownies from her recipe binder, but keeps talking about her new friend, Oganach. One of the strangest feelings I've ever had was going into my father's study for the first time after his funeral. Even stranger was him sitting in the corner, reminding me I wasn't allowed in there. As the sirens blared, our principal rushed us out of the school and into an old bomb shelter hidden off campus. I've lost track of how long we've been hiding down here, but Maggie swears she heard people calling our names outside. Laying in the basement, starving and bruised, I watched my pregnant mother walk by with a cigarette in hand. I could see the light forming at the end of the tunnel and prayed if I was going to be reborn again, I'm not coming back to this family. Mommy and Daddy never believed me when I said that there was a man in the attic and his tapping kept me up all night. When I went to look for myself, I found that the tapping was coming from one of his captives up there.